So today I'm going to be giving you a system that your opponent is going to hate with the black pieces, and we're going to be talking about the Nimzo-Larsen attack once again, and we're going to be talking about situations when your opponents play d5 and c5 and they don't play e5 early on, and our goal in these positions is to control this square. E5 is the $1 million square in these positions, and our goal is to eliminate or pressure the pieces that control the E5 square. For example, if our opponent develops the knight to C6, we pin the knight, and in a lot of situations we actually capture the knight. Now typically when we go into a situation like this where we can capture the knight or not, we usually wait for our opponents to play A6. So we are waiting for our opponents to provoke us and then we take. However, in the Nimzo-Larsen, in these systems, it's actually better to take anyways. And the reason is because after d3, we're going to be controlling this c4 square. And c4 is the main pawn break that black wants to achieve. We're going to talk about that later on in the video as well. But because of the fact that these pawns are doubled, that there's no more b pawn, that means that there is no more b pawn support that can go to b5 and support this c4 pawn break, which means that black's counterplay in these variations is very limited. And in this case, there are a couple of different ways that we can continue to play, but our goal is to put one knight on e5, and then we want to reinforce that knight with f4. Now our opponent struggles to take the knight because we will just simply take back with the bishop or with the pawn. Bishop takes hits the queen, pawn takes opens up the f file. There are pluses and minuses to both moves. Both of these moves are decent options in my opinion. But going back, our opponents likely will not capture, so they will just castle. We will go knight to d2, and the goal here, and what I want you to notice, is that every piece controls c4. The pawn on b3 and d3 controls c4. This is very important. The knight from e5 controls c4. The knight from d2 controls c4 as well. So everything is controlling this c4 square. That means that black cannot get this c4 pawn break without losing a pawn. And in a lot of these positions, this queen goes out to e2 as well, further supporting c4 just like that. Opponents might play a5 here, or we can go a4 to stop our opponents from playing a4 themselves, and then knight to d7. In this position, there are lots of ways that black can continue, but our general goal is going to be to castle. Let's say they play h6, we're going to castle in these positions, and we're going to be doing a rook lift with this rook. Rook to f3, and then bring the rook either to h3 or g3 to attack this black king. So this is a very powerful idea. Opponents might try to get rid of this knight. However, we have moves like queen to h5, and if they take here, we go fe5, and we get into a situation like this where we have this incredible attacking position, and this is just very, very dangerous for the black pieces. As a matter of fact, one of the best moves in this position is this move, rook to f6. Absolutely brilliant, and if the rook is taken, this is going to be completely winning for white because we just simply take back. And the problem is, if the bishop moves, we just give a check on g4, king has to move, and queen g7 is checkmate. So moving on to a different situation, what if our opponents don't play a move like a6 or e6 or knight to f6, because in this case we can take to damage the structure. What if they just play a move like bishop to d7, just simply defending the knight, and in this case if we capture, they will simply capture back? Well, our setup is going to be very similar. We will go knight to f3, and we will castle first, and then we will capture on c6. Now here we have to be careful. We cannot play knight e5 right away. This loses the game to knight takes e5, and our bishop is hanging. If we take the bishop, this knight takes the bishop back, or you can even take it this knight because you defend the other one, but mainly let's just say black takes back this way, and this is called a rubber band. This sort of a situation when there's a piece configuration like this. There's a bishop here trying to pin this knight, but the bishop blocks the pin. There is this rubber band technique, and this allows black to actually win a piece with a a much better position. Obviously, black is up a piece. So we have to be a little bit careful. We have to capture on c6 first, and then we have to jump to e5 now. But in this case, black has to be a little bit careful. If black simply plays a move like bishop to d6, in this case, we will still take c6 because not only we're getting the bishop pair back, we're also damaging the structure. Now, if black played bishop to d7 earlier, most likely black will try to avoid that. He will go rook to c8, d3, and then bishop to d6. And here, after a move like knight to d2 and castles, we have to take now. After castling, we have to capture this bishop on c6. The reason is that if we just play f4, black has this very nice move, bishop to e8. And what this does is it preserves the bishop pair. And what will happen is that, let me just make a random move. Let's say queen to e2, knight to d7 will be played. And after captures and captures, f6 will be played later on. Let's say rook to e1, and here f6. And this bishop gets out this way. And theoretically, this has been proven to be very, very good for the black pieces in the long run due to the bishop pair. So we have to avoid this scenario, and we actually have to take this bishop on c6. And after rook captures back, we go f4, and now black plays b5. We go queen to e2, trying to control this square on c4. The best move by black is to still play c4, which is kind of a little bit strange because it does sacrifice the pawn. However, a lot of your opponents are not very likely to play a move like c4, at least right away, sacrificing a pawn like this, because you just take the pawn and you're up a pawn, but you open up the position. So this is possible for black, but most likely your opponents will not go for this. This is a bit of a rare situation to sacrifice a pawn on c4 like this. However, instead of that, they might play moves like h6, for example. And in these situations, we can play c4 ourselves. And we're stopping this c4 pawn break pretty much forever. After bc4, we can go dc4. And this is just a very nice position because we can go for e4 on the next move. Of course, d4 not possible. This is a protected passed pawn. However, there's e5. This is a fork and it wins a piece. So this pawn has to be taken. There's really no other good option. And after knight captures, and queen captures, we have this situation once again. Of course, the rook was hanging, black moves it back. We have this situation where we have a very active position as the white pieces, and we're slightly better. And we can play moves like rook to f3, maneuver this rook to g3, and go after this black king, which is going to be very, very vulnerable. Now let's take a look at another scenario that happens quite often, and that is this move pawn to a6, which stops bishop to b5 by the white pieces. That means that white cannot develop this way. However, that is totally fine. We will continue with knight to f3, normal developing move, controlling this e5 square, knight to c6. Now we cannot go out to this diagonal anymore, but what we can do instead is just simply go g3, just fianchetto our bishop, knight to f6, we will go bishop to g2. And in this case, this leads to different strategic games. In a position like this, you can play knight e5, and that's fine, but what I would recommend is just to simply castle in these positions and play this like a queen's gambit declined, where you play d4 and c4 and you get these sort of positions. You can consider a move like knight to e5, of course, all the way back here, but after captures and bishop d6, the problem is all the pieces are getting traded off and you don't really have enough time to bring this knight over here. That takes way too long. So this is just going to be advantageous for black slightly. So instead of that, we don't want to play that variation in this case, and what we want to do instead is just simply castle. And after a move like bishop to d6, we will go d4, and after captures and knight captures, an exchange will happen in the center, queen takes back, and we will get into a situation like this where we will execute the c4 pawn break once again. So this a6 move that black played earlier leads to completely different games because we cannot bring this bishop out to this diagonal right here. We have to fianchetto it, and we still have a choice. We can decide what type of position we want to get. As I said, what I would recommend is to just simply go into a position that resembles a queen's gambit declined, where you are actually better with the white pieces. You can play a move like queen to h4, and and this is a very powerful move because it threatens this knight, and which threatens the pawn on d5. And after a move like, let's say, h6, bishop takes f6, queen takes, and then queen takes f6, pawn takes, this pawn is very, very loose. After takes, and bishop takes, this would be a completely winning position for the white pieces. If instead of capturing on d4, let's say our opponent simply castles, well, in these situations we can take ourselves, black will simply take it back, and we will continue with c4 all the same. And the positions are going to be different here, because after a move like queen to e7, we'll put this knight on c3, and this is a very reasonable way to play as well. And our goal is going to be to pressure this d5 pawn. Let's say a move like bishop to d7 is played, we can even play a move like queen e2, and we can prepare this move e4. Let's say rook to b8 in this position, we can go e4. Now we're threatening e5, so black has to respond to this threat. Let's say black takes, and we will simply capture on e4, and we will have a more desirable position because black's structure is quite split. The pawn on c6 is quite weak, and also white has better pieces, which makes this position better for the white pieces, and this is going to be very annoying to defend with black.